A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We're going to go to the ACL State Director for New South Wales and the ACT, Mr. Joshua Rowe. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me as always.
Josh, so much going on in this world at the moment. Obviously, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. I want to quote what Trump has said about it. It was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's exactly right, isn't it, Andrew? And it was only a couple of millimetres away from history being entirely different and us waking up yesterday to hearing of the assassination of Trump. But as he said, God's prevented that from happening, and that's a providential happening. I'm just so grateful that the Lord has protected him and that hasn't happened.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I think there's a lot of people around the world that are glad that it didn't happen. Sadly, there's some people that would have wanted it to be successful. But let's talk about, what does this say to us about the state of modern politics, not just in the US, but also here in Australia and in Britain and across all westernised democracies?
Look, I think the polarisation of politics is crazy at the current cultural moment, and it's just gone too far in America. I mean, we saw the weaponization of the state through lawfare not too long ago against Trump, and now an attempted assassination. They just keep going at him personally. And, you know, what happens, Andrew, is there's an inevitable resort to violence when you lose the ability for legitimate debate within politics. And the way that the media is framing things, the way that political campaigns are being run nowadays, and what's on socials, especially for young people accessing social media, there's a real lack of robust debate, even here home in Australia. And there's this generation that's being groomed in these political biases, polarisation and militancy, and a real extremism in their political approach. And that highlights the importance of the free exchange of information, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of these things that we fight for. It's so important that we have them and that we're able to use them in ways that promote good debate about policy and in politics, because otherwise what's resorted to is these kinds of means, and that is a threat to democracy when an attempted assassination is brought against a candidate for presidency in America.
Absolutely, because if you think closer to home, we saw the same sort of campaign launched against people like Abbott, for example, to a lesser extent Morrison. Gillard would say she was targeted because she was a woman. But what we're seeing is that it's very personal now, isn't it? It's not about policy. It's not about leadership and decision-making. Everything seems to be personal, that we identify these leaders as these individuals, as these people who are potentially going to be causing all these problems. And so it gets very personal, doesn't it? And obviously what we saw over the weekend was one young man who most probably was not well in the head, I suspect, has decided that for him to make the world a better place, Trump needs to be removed. Not Trump's policies, not Trump's ideas for the future or his decision-making as a leader, but Trump, the human being, had to be removed to try and save America. It was very personal, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so as you say, Andrew, it's a really important point that, you know, clearly this young man is quite disturbed to take actions into his own hands in this way. But it's very important for us to recognise that there is an influence from the political messaging and especially the media in America on the thinking of the younger generation. There's this cultivating or grooming in this political polarisation. And when they're consistently saying through their campaigns, this is the Democrats, and the media is reinforcing it, that Trump is a threat to democracy, Trump is an autocratic fascist who needs to be eliminated, Biden saying we need to put Trump in the bullseye, these kind of comments are actually inciting violence against Trump. And you can see that kind of messaging and the constant echo chamber in the media in that way is actually radicalizing young adults like this 20-year-old to be both, yes, probably mentally ill and disturbed, but then to think that it's actually appropriate to take actions in his own hands to influence the political outcome of the next election.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, that comment from Biden is just horrible, isn't it? That a bullseye needs to be put on him, because when you've got 300 million people in your population base, and statistically there is a small percentage of them who aren't well in the mind, and there's easy access to guns. I mean, those sort of comments are just, they are very inflammatory and very dangerous, aren't they?
They are, that's right. There's just no place for those kind of comments. And one of the issues that the Democrats have now is that the campaign that they're running is against the personality of Donald Trump. You highlighted it so clearly, rather than his policies. And so they've continued to employ this kind of messaging. I heard just this morning that in Pennsylvania they've started pulling some of their adverts for their campaigns, the Democrats. And I think they're pulling them because they're concerned that the messaging in them is inciting violence and has that kind of personal attack sentiment towards it. So they're in a difficult position now where they've got to rethink their whole campaign and stop attacking Donald Trump as a person and start getting back to real debate about politics, policy making, and what's really important for the country and for its unity.
Do you think they're capable of doing that?
Look, I don't. I don't think they are. From what I've seen throughout the last term, I think that their messaging has been radical. I think that there is a real lack of being able to engage in good debate. There's censorship becoming more and more prevalent in the country, where things that are reasonable and appropriate to be said, things like biological facts about sex, it cannot even be discussed within the mainstream. They're censored. They're not talked about. And so, at least from what I've seen so far, it seems that they are incapable of it, and they're going to really have to turn something around if they want to be.
Yeah, it seems systematic and or systemic. It doesn't seem to be able to be changed, I think, in a few months. But I think we need to point out too, don't we, Joshua, that Australia is so different to America. I think lazy journalists sometimes try and draw parallels between Australia and America, but we're such different nations. To my knowledge, an Australian Prime Minister has never been assassinated, but the US has had a long history of political assassinations, haven't they? Right back to, I know Lincoln was assassinated, one of their greatest leaders ever, but from then until now, there's been a number of both successful and unsuccessful assassination attempts on presidents, hasn't there?
Yeah, well, and obviously the prominent one of John F. Kennedy as well there. I mean, it is a different political situation there, and obviously accessibility to guns, as you said, through the laws there is just makes for a completely different environment. And that again is the issue, is that when you've got ever more polarized and radical politics and then access for many people within the country to weapons, you're going to inevitably get assassination attempts like this coming against the former President Donald Trump, and it just needs to be condemned. I know that some media in America haven't even been willing, CNN, for example, to call it an assassination attempt. They've been using language that's tried to bend around that reality, but there's no bending around it. It is an assassination attempt, and it does speak to the difficulty in America at the moment in the politics, the polarization that needs to be turned around.
So CNN won't even say the word assassination. What word are they using to describe it? A shooting. They'll use different language that's kind of sanitized and not that it wasn't directed towards Trump. Some of them are saying that he fell over when he was hit with the bullet, as opposed to being shot in the ear and then going down to protect himself. There's all kinds of different comments that are being made, and it again just shows that the left of politics, or the left of the media especially, is captured, and that they're not actually reporting on objective fact and what's going on, but they're very politically biased. Well, I mean, let me ask you, what do you think their narrative would be if Obama was the one who was clipped in the ear by a bullet by a young male, 20-year-old white shooter? How do you think they would have described that to the masses?
Yeah, well, it would have been the complete opposite, wouldn't it? I mean, they would have been singing from the rooftops and highlighting that it was an assassination attempt, highlighting that it was the impact of the white patriarchy, and that men need to be more effeminate and more toned down, and that strong masculinity and male leadership is a bad thing within the community. I mean, there would have been all kinds of ways of them describing it, but what can be said is that they wouldn't have been trying to find words to get around it, and they would have been calling it an apple for an apple rather than seeking to distort the facts.
Yeah, and obviously as Christians, we've got to sift our way through modern media, don't we, to work out what's truth and what is propaganda. But we'll move on from the Trump incident. Let's quickly talk about the Equality Bill update in the New South Wales Parliament. What's going on there?
Yeah, so the Equality Bill went to a committee hearing earlier in the year, and the committee came out and reported on the bill. So there was consultation of community members over 2 days. Thankfully, ACL was able to participate in that. I spoke at that committee hearing. And the committee came out after those 2 days and said that they had no recommendation, but that the chamber or the House consider the bill in detail, which was very, very poor form, and it was very unhelpful. So now the bill is sitting around waiting to be debated in what's called the second reading debate before it is progressed to a vote and hopefully defeated. I've gone into a number of the complexities of this bill on the program before and explained just how draconian, how horrible this legislation would be for the people of New South Wales amongst a couple of key issues. However, I did want to specifically speak to the surrogacy component of the legislation today.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
Well, the surrogacy component is that the Alex Greenwich actually seeks to decriminalise commercial surrogacy abroad outside of New South Wales. So currently it's criminal to access commercial surrogacy arrangements overseas. And what that is actually the paying of women overseas for their reproductive system or to carry a child, bear a child.
Yep.
Now, that is currently criminal. However, Greenwich wants to decriminalise that, which inevitably leads to the exploitation of economically vulnerable women abroad. Yep. And he also wants to lower the bar for parentage orders from the Supreme Court. So currently it's exceptional circumstances. He wants to lower that to best interests of the child. Now, I mean, best interests of the child might sound like a good thing to us, which if it is determined a certain way, it is. But what the best interests of a child is a big and important question, and it actually lowers the bar so that the courts can make parentage orders against a biological mother overseas to take the child from them and to bring that child to a couple in New South Wales, which in most cases would be a gay couple.
Yeah, and it's so broad, isn't it, that term, best interest of the child? That's open to a lot of bias and a lot of interpretation, isn't it, as a law, because you could argue it both ways. The best interests of a child are its mother, but then you could argue it economically. Well, they're best off in Australia because of the standard of living and the education opportunities. So, yeah, not really a good term to use, is it?
No, it's not. It's not, especially when that determination is usually made off the economic viability of the parents, as opposed to the child's right to their biological parent. And the issue is with more and more new ways to talk and discuss about family arrangements and the common acceptance of different forms of family arrangements, 2 males, 2 females, male and female, and a lot of other things. It's becoming less and less popular to say that the best interests of the child are to their biological mother and father, as we believe as Christians, and it's becoming more popular to say that the best interest of the child is whoever can provide for them most economically and whoever wants them the most.
Yeah.
So when you start using that language, it is inevitable that it allows people to access in New South Wales commercial surrogacy arrangements with women who are economically vulnerable overseas. And then even if that mother wants to keep their child once they've born them, they're able to, through the Supreme Court, rip that child away from the mother.
Yeah, absolutely. There's heaps going on. The Chloe Cole tour of Australia I thought was very successful. She gave a great address to one eyewitness in Brisbane, but we haven't really got time to dig into that. But I want to just quickly highlight the fact that you're doing a northern New South Wales trip, Joshua. Tell me about that quickly.
Yes, sure, Andrew. Yeah, I'm going up to northern New South Wales to speak at a number of churches. That's between early August, so about the 2nd of August and the 8th of August. And I'll be speaking up the way in places like Port Macquarie, Ballina, Coffs Harbour. And I just wanted to mention to people that during that time, while I'm there, I'm more than happy to come and to meet with pastors, local Christian leaders in the community or MPs. If there's anyone listening who would like to meet with me while I'm up in northern New South Wales, please go to our website, www.acl.org.au, and we've got a contact us down the bottom, a form down the bottom there, and you can just write a message through to us, which will get to me, saying that you'd like to meet and catch up for coffee or to pray together, or for me to come and speak to a men's group or to church, whatever it might be. That would be really wonderful.
So Joshua Rowe is on the road. That is from Friday the 2nd of August. He's returning on Friday the 8th of August, and he's going to be heading up from Sydney to Port Macquarie, Ballina, Coffs Harbour. It's a tough trip, Josh. I'll tell you what, those are tough places to visit. Some of the most beautiful parts of Australia there. So Port Macquarie, Ballina, Coffs Harbour, and anywhere in between. So if you think your pastor may want to meet Joshua Rowe, the State Director for the Australian Christian Lobby, or maybe a state MP or a local government official or a federal member, if you feel there'd be any benefit in a meeting, maybe you can facilitate that meeting for Josh before he comes. Get in contact with him. Just go to the ACL website, which is acl.org.au. Joshua Rowe, a lot to cover today. You did it really well, as always. Very informative, very insightful. And I want to thank you for joining us on 2020 Today.
Thanks, Andrew, for having me.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.